Welcome to Forbidden Desires channel that we hope you will have fun with us. Enjoy watching. The house felt hollow without William, not just empty hollow like something vital had been scraped out of the walls, leaving only the shell behind. For 23 years I had built my life around him, woven myself into the fabric of our marriage so tightly that now with him gone, I wasn't sure where I ended, and the loss began a week ago. I was still his wife a week ago. I still believed in the quiet routines of our life, in the steadiness of it, and then in a single breath it was gone. It just happened live. I didn't mean to hurt you, as if intent mattered, as if the fact that he hadn't planned on breaking me made it any easier to bear. But the worst part wasn't even the betrayal. It was the relief in his voice, like confessing had unburdened him, like I should somehow be grateful that he had finally set me free. I had called Rail that night, my hand shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. Before this story spirals even further, make sure to subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications for more. And when the story ends, don't forget to show your support through likes and comments. Your father is leaving. I had whispered, my voice brittle and foreign to my own ears. He's been cheating. It's over, and without hesitation my son had answered, I'm coming home. By evening he was there. The moment I opened the door, he pulled me into his arms, holding me like he used to when he was small. When he still thought I had the power to fix everything, now it was the other way around. He held me solid and steady while I crumbled. I cried into his shoulder, my fingers gripping the fabric of his jacket as if it were the only thing keeping me upright. I've got you, Mom, he murmured, rubbing slow, soothing circles on my back. I'm here, and he was. Rail moved back into his old room without a word about how long he planned to stay. He didn't ask if I wanted him there, didn't try to tell me how to move forward. He just settled in, filling the house with his presence the way he had before he left for college. At first I wasn't sure how to feel about it. Grateful, yes, but also exposed. Rail had always been perceptive, too much so for his own good. He saw things I tried to hide, knew when I was lying. Even when I lied to myself one evening as we sat on the couch. I stared down at the half-empty bottle of wine between us, swirling my glass absent. I can't believe he did this. I murmured. I gave him everything. I built my whole life around him, and now it's just gone. Rail didn't answer right away. He let my words settle heavy and bitter between us. Finally he exhaled. He's an idiot, he said. You deserved better. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's what people say when they don't know what else to say. He turned to me, then his expression unreadable. No, Mom. I mean it. You deserved so much better. Something about the way he said. It made my throat tighten. I took another sip of wine, averting my eyes maybe. But what now? What do I even do with myself? You live, he said simply. You figure out what makes you happy. I scoffed, shaking my head. I don't even know who I am without him. Then I guess it's time to find out. I wanted to tell him it wasn't that simple, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I leaned my head back against the couch, staring at the ceiling. I hate him, I whispered, but even as I said it, I wasn't sure if it was true. Raul shifted beside me, and a moment later I felt his fingers wrap around mine, a small gesture but grounding. I closed my eyes, letting myself take comfort in the warmth of his hand. The days passed in a strange blur. Mornings used to mean waking up to the sound of William's razor buzzing in the bathroom, the scent of his aftershave lingering in the air. Now mornings were quiet except for the occasional sound of Rail making coffee in the kitchen. Evenings were the hardest. That was when the loneliness crept in, wrapping around me like a second skin. I would sit in the dimly lit living room, staring at nothing, drowning in memories I wished I could erase. That was when Rail would find me. He never pushed, never forced me to talk. He just sat beside me, sometimes in silence, sometimes watching old movies neither of us paid much attention to. And then one night something shifted. I had been scrolling mindless through my phone when I saw it, a photo. William and Mary sitting together at a restaurant, their heads close, smiling like they had won. Starting new chapters. A sharp hollow pain settled in my C******T. I turned off my phone and tossed it onto the couch. Mom Raul's voice was quiet. I forced a smile, but my vision blurred. He looks happy. The words felt like glass in my throat. Raul didn't even glance at the phone, he didn't need to. He just exhaled slowly and reached for me, pulling me against him. I didn't resist. I let myself lean into him. Let myself feel small for once. His arms tightened around me. He doesn't deserve a single tear from you. A tear slipped down my cheek anyway. I don't know how to stop. Rail sighed, his breath warm against my hair. Then I'll be here until you do. I didn't know how long we sat like that, but for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel alone. The days blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and grief. No matter how much I tried to force myself forward to pretend I was healing, the truth was simpler. I wasn't. The pain sat inside me, lodged deep like a stone in my C*******T, pressing down on my ribs, making every breath feel like an effort I couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep, couldn't move without feeling like the world had shifted into something unfamiliar, something that no longer made sense to me. Rail did everything. He cooked meals I barely touched, cleaned rooms I no longer cared about, filled the fridge with groceries I couldn't bring myself to look at. He was patient in a way I didn't deserve, watching me closely, stepping in when I faltered, never pushing me, but always there. Mom, you have to eat something, he would say gently, setting a plate in front of me, waiting with quiet determination until I took at least a few bites. Some nights I'd wake up gasping for air, my body heavy with panic, my mind tangled in dreams of William's face, his voice, his betrayal, his absence. And every time Rail was there, he would sit with me in the dark, his presence steady, reassuring, unshaven. I wanted to be okay for him. I wanted to pull myself together, to be the strong mother I had always been. But the weight of everything was too much. And then one morning I collapsed. I barely remembered it, just a flash of dizziness, a rush of nausea, the sound of Rail's voice sharp and panicked, calling my name as my knees buckled and the world tilted violently. When I opened my eyes again, I was in a hospital bed, the beeping of machines filling the room, my arms heavy, my body weak. His lips pressing into a thin line. Why do you? His words struck me harder than they should have. I swallowed, shifting my stance. Because you make everything impossible. He let out a low laugh, but there was no humor in it. I make everything impossible. He pushed off the wall, stepping closer. You walk around this apartment like you don't notice anything, like you don't see it. See what I challenged, though I already knew. His jaw tightened. His hands curled into fists at his sides before he suddenly turned away, exhaling sharply as if trying to get control of himself. I should have let it go. I should have let the moment pass, waited for the inevitable rescue and forgotten this ever happened, but I couldn't. Was I a temptation you couldn't take? The words slipped out before I could stop them. My voice was quiet, but it carried in the small space between us. Is that why you were fighting? Theodore turned back to me, and before I could take a breath, his lips were on mine. It wasn't soft, it wasn't tentative. It was raw, desperate, like something that had been held back for too long, something dangerous finally being unleashed. The shock of it sent my back against the elevator wall, his body following mine. His hands gripped my waist, his fingers pressing into the fabric of my blouse, as if trying to convince himself that I was real, and I was. I was burning, melting, unraveling, under the weight of something I had refused to name for years. When he pulled away, I was breathless. His forehead rested against mine, his breathing uneven. I should have pushed him away. I should have said something, anything to stop whatever this was from going further, but I didn't. Instead, I whispered, Theodore, you can't get away from me now. He murmured against my lips. Until we're rescued, you belong to me. My stomach flipped. The word should have scared me, should have made me furious. But they didn't. Because I realized something terrifying. I had belonged to him long before this moment. I had belonged to him since the first time he looked at me like I was something he both hated and craved. Since the first time I saw him clench his jaw whenever Arthur touched me. Since the first time I had caught my own thoughts lingering on him longer than they should. This wasn't new. It had always been there waiting, and now that it was out in the open, there was no taking it back. Theodore kissed me again, slower, this time as if savoring it, as if letting it settle between us, marking a moment neither of us could erase. By the time the elevator jerked back to life, reality came crashing down. I pulled away, my hand still resting against his C*******T. His heartbeat was wild beneath my fingertips. We didn't speak as the doors slid open. But as I stepped out into the hallway, my legs unsteady, I heard him behind me. "Don't pretend this didn't happen," he said, his voice low. I turned, meeting his gaze. "I won't," I admitted, and that was how it began. I told myself it was a mistake, that it was the heat of the moment, the tension of being trapped together, the sharp edges of years spent pretending. We didn't feel what we felt. But the problem with pretending is that once the truth slips out, it refuses to be buried again. That night I lay beside Kale, staring at the ceiling, my body still tingling from the way Theodore had kissed me, from the way his hands had held me like he had been starving for years. I tried to focus on the steady rhythm of Arthur's breathing, on the familiarity of our life together. But all I could think about was how Theodore had looked at me when the elevator doors opened. I won't pretend this didn't happen, and neither would I. The next day at work I was distracted. I barely listened to my clients, barely heard my assistant reminding me about upcoming showings. My body was present, but my mind was elsewhere, on the memory of Theodore's lips, on the way his voice had turned rough when he said I belonged to him. Lunch. My phone buzzed. New message, Theodore. I stared at it for a long moment before opening it. 4 p.m. 4:15. Oakwood Drive. Show it to me. Frowned, confused. I didn't have a scheduled showing at that address, but I recognized the property, an empty modern house on the outskirts of the city, one of the high-end listings I had been trying to sell for months. I should have ignored him. I should have deleted the message and gone about my day. But at 210:45 I was already on my way. The house was quiet when I arrived. The air inside cool from the central AC, the scent of polished wood and fresh paint filling my lungs. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the pristine marble floors. It was the kind of house people dreamed of owning, a place full of possibilities. I had barely stepped inside when I heard the door click shut. Behind me I turned, and there he was. Theodore leaned against the door frame, arms crossed, watching me with that same unreadable expression he always had when we were alone. "There's no client, is there?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. His lips curled slightly. "You're quick." I should have been angry. I should have told him this was reckless, that whatever had happened between us and the elevator was a mistake, but I didn't. Instead, I let him step closer. "You planned this?" I said, not moving. As he approached, he nodded. "I wanted to see if you'd come, and now that I'm here." Theodore reached out, brushing his fingertips against my wrist, and I shivered at the contact. His voice was low, teasing, but there was something dark beneath it. "Now," he murmured, "you can't run away." I should have stopped this. I should have walked out that door and never looked back. But when his hands found my waist, pulling me against him, I melted. There was no hesitation this time, no pretending. We didn't know exactly what we were doing. His mouth found mine, and I responded instantly, my fingers tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. It was hungry, desperate, the kind of kiss that stripped away reason and left nothing but need. Theodore pressed me back until I hit the cool surface of the kitchen counter, his body flush against mine, his hands moving over me like he had been waiting for this forever. Maybe he had. Maybe I had 3. I gasped when his lips trailed down to my neck, his breath hot against my skin. "Theodore, this is dangerous," he whispered against my throat. He nodded. He lifted his head, his dark eyes searching mine, then tell me to stop. I opened my mouth. No words came. Theodore smirked. That's what I thought. The afternoon passed in a blur of heat and tangled limbs, of whispered names and stolen moments. It was reckless and selfish and completely impossible. But for the first time in years I felt alive. By the time I left the house, the sun was already beginning to set. My blouse was slightly wrinkled, my lips still swollen from his kisses, my body thrumming with the aftermath of what we had just done. I told myself it was a one-time thing. But deep down I knew the truth. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Over the next few weeks we became experts at secrecy. Theodore arranged fake house showings, carefully choosing properties Arthur would never ask about. He texted me at odd hours short messages that sent a thrill through me every time I read them tomorrow. 10 of the penthouse on Collins Avenue. Come to the office parking lot at lunch. I need to see you. I can't sleep. Are you thinking about me too? It was more than I should have been home. I played the perfect wife. I smiled at Arthur, asked about his day, sat beside him on the couch while he watched TV. But the guilt never came because the truth was I had never felt for Arthur what I felt for Theodore. Arthur was safety. Theodore was fire, and I was no longer afraid of burning. One afternoon, as I was leaving the agency, my phone buzzed again. 4 p.m., the beach house on Ocean Drive. Don't be late. I should have ignored it. I should have gone home. Instead, I drove straight there. Theodore was already waiting, leaning against the doorway. His shirt, unbuttoned at the top sleeves, rolled up as if he had been impatient. As soon as I stepped inside, he shut the door, pulling me against him, his mouth capturing mine in a deep, searing kiss. I laughed breathlessly when he finally pulled back. You planned this one too. His hand slid down my back, fingers pressing into my SS. I always plan. I tilted my head, running a hand down his C******T. And what if I stopped showing up? Theodore's jaw clenched, he exhaled slowly, his voice lower, now dangerous. Then I'd come find you. A shiver ran through me, but not from fear, because the truth was I wanted to be found. I wanted this. I wanted him. As we fell into each other once again, lost in the heat and secrecy of what we had become, I knew there was no turning back. We were past the point of no return. Arthur noticed, course he did. It started with small comments offhand, almost teasing. You've been in a good mood lately, he said. One evening as we sat on the balcony watching the Miami skyline glow against the night. I had my wine, he had his whiskey, and I felt Theodore's presence somewhere in the apartment behind us, like a phantom that never truly left my skin. I forced a smile, twirling my glass between my fingers. Work is going well. Arthur studied me for a moment, his brow furrowing slightly. It's more than that, you look, he hesitated, searching for the right word. You look like you're in love. The wine nearly slipped from my grip. I held my breath, forcing myself to laugh, to brush it off as nothing. But inside my heart was pounding because it was the truth, the one thing no one could say aloud. I was in love, and it wasn't with my husband. After that, I became more careful. Theodore and I never acknowledged each other at home. We didn't speak in front of Arthur, barely even made eye contact. It was a game of control, a silent agreement that only made everything burn hotter. When we were alone at night, I would lie beside Arthur, feeling the weight of his arm draped over my waist. My mind elsewhere, back in the penthouse, in the beach house, in the stolen moments where Theodore's hands were on me instead, and Theodore, he was just as tormented. He would walk past me in the hallway close enough that I could smell the faint traces of his cologne, feel the heat of his body. But he wouldn't touch me, wouldn't even look at me, and it drove me insane because I knew the second we were alone, the second we stepped out of this illusion of restraint, he would devour me. One afternoon I was at the agency finishing up paperwork when my phone vibrated. That was all it said, no location, no time, just a single word, and I knew exactly where to go. When I arrived at the house on 7th Street, Theodore was already inside, waiting in the empty living room. He had his hands in his pockets, his jaw clenched, the muscles in his forearms tense like he was barely holding something back. I shut the door behind me, locking it. We didn't speak. There was no need the moment I stepped toward him. He grabbed me, his lips crashing against mine, and I felt everything we had been holding back ignite into something uncontrollable. It was different this time. rougher, desperate. 1.5 as his hands were everywhere gripping, claiming pulling me closer like he needed proof that I was real, that this was real, and it was. This was the only time either of us felt alive. When it was over, we lay tangled together on the cool wooden floor. Our breathing ragged, our bodies damp with sweat. Theodore traced a finger down my arm, his touch featherlight. How long can we do this? I turned my head, meeting his gaze. As long as we want. He exhaled, his lips curving into something bitter. No, as long as we can. The truth stung because we both knew this couldn't last forever. Arthur wasn't stupid. He was already watching me, already questioning the change in me. He didn't suspect who it was, but he knew there was someone. One day he would find out, and when that day came, everything would come crashing down. But until then, I would let the fire consume me. Because Theodore wasn't just a secret. He was a part of me. My story ends here. If you feel that this story is meaningful and brings useful lessons, please like and subscribe to the channel to support me. Thanks for listening, and see you in the next videos.